Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Required minimum distributions, or RMDs, have undergone some fairly significant updates and changes in recent years, and a couple as we go into 2025. So whether you're already at required minimum distribution age or you're planning for them in the future, these changes could affect your financial plan. So let's go over the rules, the strategies, and everything you need to know to go into this year and beyond. A required minimum distribution, or RMD, is the required amount of money you must withdraw from your retirement account each year once you reach a certain age based on actuarial tables. This ensures that people withdraw from their retirement accounts and, importantly, from the government's perspective, pay taxes on this money rather than allowing this money to stay invested and indefinitely deferring paying taxes on this money. As of 2025, the age you must start taking required minimum distributions is 73. This isn't technically a change for 2025. The RMD age of 73 did go into effect in 2023, but slowly and surely, this RMD age has steadily been increasing over time. And looking down the road, there is another change in the future. By 2033, RMD age will increase to 75. And because this segment is a little bit of a refresher and not simply an outright change for this year, let's also touch on the accounts and list them here that are generally subject to RMDs. Now, in talking about ages, let's talk about that year in which you turn 73. That first year you're required to take your RMD. You're given a little bit of a grace year in this year. So let's say you turn 73 in 2025. Well, at this point, you would be required to take your first required minimum distribution by April 1st of 2026. So assuming you turn 73 in 2025 and have a $500,000 traditional 401k account balance as of December 31st, 2024, just a little reminder here, your RMD is calculated on your account balance from the previous year. You would calculate your RMD using the IRS table. For a 73-year-old, the distribution factor is 26.5. So you take your account balance divided by your distribution factor, and in this case, about $19,000 would be your required minimum distribution for the year, and you would have until April 1st of 2026 to withdraw this amount. However, it's worth keeping in mind that the year in which you turn 73 is really the only time you're given that grace period up to April 1st to take your RMD. In all subsequent years, generally speaking, you have to take your RMD by December 31st of the year. And worth talking about, in our previous example, if you delay taking your first RMD until April of 2026, you very well could end up taking two RMDs in 2026. That RMD from 2025 that you delayed until April 1st of 2026 to take, as well as the RMD from 2026 itself. And this is worth keeping in mind because if you end up taking two RMDs, this could affect you from a tax stance and push you into a higher tax bracket and increase your tax bill for the year. So that's just something to be aware of. In thinking about this deadline by which you must take your RMD, which is most often December 31st, there have been some notable changes to the penalty for not taking your required minimum distribution in a timely fashion. And again, these changes went into effect in 2023, so not necessarily a change that specifically happened in 2025, but they are notable nonetheless. Prior to 2023, failing to take your RMD by the end of the year resulted in a penalty of 50% of the amount you should have otherwise withdrawn. Starting in 2023, that penalty amount was reduced to 25%. And if you catch the mistake in a timely fashion, meaning you catch it before the IRS does, that penalty is reduced to 10%. Now, these are notable reductions, but it's best to take your RMD in full and on time to avoid penalties altogether. So what would that look like? If you had a required minimum distribution of $20,000 under the previous rules, the IRS penalty for missing this RMD would have been $10,000, being that the IRS penalty is now 25% of the amount that you should have withdrawn. The new penalty amount would be $5,000, and assuming you correct it in a timely fashion, that penalty is further reduced to just $2,000. While reduced penalties do offer more flexibility date, it's still best to just take your RMD in full and on time to avoid any unnecessary fees. After all, your money has far better uses pretty much doing anything else than paying unnecessary penalties to the government. And if you're in a position where you don't need your RMD from a financial standpoint, that's a good position to be in. It means all your bases are covered. And I do have a video going over in-depth ways to avoid taking your RMD from a legal stance if you don't need to do it, and I will link it here and down below if you're interested. One legal way to get out of taking your RMD is through a Qualified Charitable Distribution, a QCD. This is a tax-efficient way for individuals to donate directly to a qualified charity from their individual retirement account, or their IRA. These distributions not only support charitable causes, but they satisfy your RMD without being counted towards taxable income. And since they're not included in your taxable income, this can go a long way towards reducing your taxes for the year. And recently, qualified charitable distributions have begun to be indexed for inflation. This was not always the case in the past. So the new limit for 2025 is $108,000. So if you're a retiree with a very hefty retirement balance, this is something that can go a long way towards helping a cause you care about while also reducing your taxable income. Roth IRAs have never been subject to RMDs in the account holder's lifetime. However, that was not always true of Roth 401ks. Prior to 2024, Roth 401ks, just like a traditional 401k, were subject to RMDs. However, notably, any withdrawals from these accounts would come out tax-free because they were Roth accounts. But notably, this inconsistency between Roth 401ks and Roth IRAs caused confusion for retirees. So now, following 2024, there are no required minimum distributions on Roth 401ks. This can allow the retiree to leave their money invested and growing for longer and giving their retiree more flexibility with their money, and honestly, it's a big selling point for Roths. Inherited retirement accounts have seen notable changes in recent years. Prior to 2019, beneficiaries could essentially stretch out RMDs over the course of their entire lifetime. And in many cases, this would allow people to leave money invested in tax-deferred accounts for decades. But then along came the Secure Act of 2019, and it mandated the rule that most non-spouse beneficiaries had to deplete these accounts within 10 years. But it still left a bit of a gray area because it didn't say whether these withdrawals had to be taken on an annual basis or just that the funds had to fully be depleted within that 10-year time horizon. Well, as of 2025, we have concrete rules on how these distributions have to be handled. And here we have two primary situations where someone inherits an account from somebody who was already taking RMDs on their account and someone who inherits an account from somebody who was not yet taking RMDs on that account. Let's say John inherits a $400,000 traditional 401k from his father, who was already taking RMDs. John must continue taking RMDs based on his own life expectancy, but the account still has to be fully depleted within 10 years. For simplicity, let's assume John inherits the account at the age of 50. His required minimum distribution would be roughly $11,050 a year. However, sticking to the minimum withdrawal isn't going to deplete the full $400,000 balance within 10 years. After 9 years, he could still very well have a balance of over $300,000 remaining. If John had followed this pattern in year 10, he would be forced to empty the account entirely, and that would force him into a very high tax bracket and likely leave him with a very hefty tax bill. So it would be smarter for John to take out more than his required minimum distribution to take out these funds in the most tax efficient way possible. An RMD for a non-spouse beneficiary is based off their life expectancy factor and based off the IRS single life expectancy factor. I'll link a table to that down below if you're interested. If a beneficiary inherits an account where the deceased has not yet started taking RMDs, they aren't required to make any sort of annual withdrawal. However, notably, this account still does have to be depleted within 10 years' time, so you want to do this in the most tax-efficient way possible. It's also worth keeping in mind that this 10-year rule does apply to both traditional and Roth accounts, but notably, if it's a Roth account, any withdrawals you make do not affect you from a tax standpoint, so that can be an added perk of those Roth accounts. When When a spouse inherits an account from the deceased partner, different rules apply. Spouses have a few options. If they inherit an account, they could roll it over into their own IRA and take RMDs based on their own RMD age. This could help delay taking those RMDs if the surviving spouse is younger. They could treat it as an inherited account and take RMDs based on their own life expectancy factor, or they have the option to treat the deceased as the account owner and delay taking RMDs until the deceased would have otherwise reached RMD age. And this can help to delay those RMDs if the spouse who died was much younger. Even if the spouse who passed away was already taking RMDs, all three options are still available to the surviving spouse. So this can give the surviving spouse a lot of flexibility with their financial planning. For instance, let's say Mike was 75 with a traditional IRA with $500,000 in it, and as such, he was required to take an annual distribution from his account. Let's say Mike passes away and his wife Susan inherits this account, but Susan is 65 years old. If Susan decides to roll over this inherited IRA to her own account, she would not have to take any RMDs because she is below RMD age. This would also allow her to spread out her distributions over a greater period of time and hopefully give her greater flexibility when it comes to tax planning. Navigating RMDs doesn't have to feel overwhelming. Staying informed is key. So whether you're preparing for your first RMD or just ensuring that you're in compliance to avoid penalties, staying informed is key. And if you're planning for RMDs down the road, there might be actions you can take to maximize your saving and reduce taxes. Do you think RMDs are in your future, or are you already in your years where they apply? Let me know your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. I feel like that's a lot. Let's streamline the RMDs. Take it out. Whew. You want to say it, but you don't want to like over say it. Blah. Didn't like the tone. Blah. That's really annoying. No. Can you believe that somebody thought I was AI generated? I'm like, how could I be AI generated and mess up this many times? Computers are way more perfect. Somebody left a comment on my recent video and said, based on my looks and my age, I couldn't be real. I must be AI. Rude. My stomach is being loud and I also feel like I have to prepare. I don't want to do that on camera. Don't say remember. Don't say it. It's not remember. We're talking about it now for the first time. So you probably already know, but just in case someone doesn't. I'm so upset. I was just like all over the place. Jeez, oh Pete, I swear. I can number my camera. After all, your money is Betty? Hey Betty, what are you doing? Drink. Without being included. Why is it so dark? I'm sorry. It's like cloudy, then bright. I hate days like this.